Hello, fellow romance book lovers. It's me, Kat, back with another book chat today. We are going to talk about Samuel by Nikki Ashton. I have never read anything by hers before, and actually this is the second book in a series. They can be read as standalones, and that's how I read this one. I haven't read the first book either, but I would like to go back and read it, considering that it's about characters that are in this book. Did that make sense? So in any case, Samuel is about Samuel and Maisie, and she was likable from the get-go. I liked Maisie a lot. Just a young woman with a good head on her shoulders, found herself in, a situation very common, and really kind of dug in and was like, I can do this, it's fine. And then Samuel, he confused me, I'll be honest. I wasn't sure whether, well, I'll take that back. I didn't really like him. He really, although I understood about the decisions that he made, let me just say that. It's not that I didn't like him. I understood I didn't agree with the decisions he's made. And maybe that's because I'm a woman and he's a man. The book starts out with him being in an affair with his swimming coach, who's much older than him. And the affair started and she's, like I said, it's an affair. She's married. Pardon me, and it started when he was 16. So there's this element of, and he's like 20 or 21 when the book starts, so it goes back into his past. I should say that the book goes back and forth between past and present, and then it also changes between Samuel's perspective and Maisie's perspective as well, which I really like, getting that dual perspective. So it starts out with that part, the affair with his swimming coach. And, it was kind of a yucky thing. It started when he was 16, and it kind of makes you feel like she was a little bit of a predator. She was quite a bit older than he was. And obviously what he thought was she was in an unhappy marriage, and she finds herself pregnant, and she tells Samuel that it's his, literally until the day the baby's born. And that rocks his world. And in walks the husband, and he puts two and two together, and he's like, oh my God. He's devastated. Even as a young man, thinking that this is his child, that he's going to step up and he wants to be with her, and he wants to take care of the child and be with her and have a relationship, and that they had already been having for years. And that clearly becomes not possible. And so I really did feel bad for him. You couldn't not. Made me really dislike the swim coach, Allie. And that's a whole other kind of part. But, he goes on with his life a bit, and he meets a girl, and she's a great girl, and, he's likes her, and it's Maisie. And they end up, having a little, like a couple nights, or one night maybe, of intimacy. And then that's it. He gets a phone call that his brother is in a bad way, and he goes to focus on his brother, and he's like, I can't do this. I really like you, but I can't do this with you right now. My brother needs my help. And he kind of walks away from her, and you can tell they like each other. And she's like, no, it's okay, I get it, that's fine, you know where I am. And you hope at that moment that, that's where the story is gonna take off, and it doesn't. It goes 8 years later, and it turns out, and so we realize that, because it goes back and forth between past and present, like I said, that Maisie found herself pregnant, and it was Samuel's, and she hadn't talked to him for a while after their weekend together, and she texts him, and she's like, hey, we need to meet and have coffee. It turns out she's pregnant, and he's still messed up over the swim coach, even though I know it said it was 8 years later, but this is part of the book where we go into the past and we see what the interaction about her telling him that she was pregnant was. And he's like, she's like, I'm going to have it. I just wanted to let you know, whatever you want to do, you want to do. I realize, I realize that you're not going to be like, oh, let's get married, because they hadn't really spoken in a few weeks. and she knew that he was focusing on helping his brother. And so he says, yeah, I don't want anything to do with this kid. But, I mean, he's not a complete ass. He tells her that he'll help support her financially. Whatever she wants to do with the money is up to her. But he will help. And she's like, no, that's okay. And he's like, no, I'm going to help. So whatever you want to do, I'm going to call a lawyer. We'll draw something up so you can count on it. And he does. So there's that part about him. And that's where I said, it's not that I didn't like him, but I didn't understand him. I just didn't get it. But yet I liked him. He was a nice guy that had a horrible thing happen to him when he was 16, by the way. You know, his judgment was a little clouded from that situation. He grew on, went through his life. Like I said, the book kind of picks up like 8 years later. He's been sending money to her. He's been living his life, growing his career. He never told anyone about the fact that he has a child out there. He knows it's a little boy. They have kept little bits. I should say, when the baby was born, she let him know. He went to the hospital and he looked at the baby and he was like, yeah, I still don't want anything to do with him. See, I don't, my heart doesn't understand that. And I realize that happens in the world, but in any case, it didn't affect how I liked the book at all. It's just, I wanted more from him. I wanted him to be like, dude, this is my kid. Anyway, so he actually ends up meeting his child in a interesting circumstance. So his affair with his coach ended his passion for swimming, and he was a really good swimmer, big part of his life. But when all that happened, he just, completely dropped it 100%. But his sister-in-law draws him in back to swimming because his niece is taking swim lessons and they need a swim coach. Or they need somebody to teach lessons at the local club, whatever. And she's trying to get him to go and do that. And, his family realizes that he dropped swimming, but they always kind of wondered, like, well, why, and they always wanted him to get back into that. He was so good at it. And so she entices him to go do that. And he's teaching a lesson. He's like, I'll give it one try. And he's teaching a lesson. And lo and behold, there's his kid. And his name's Frankie, an adorable 8-year-old boy. And he knows because he's actually seen pictures of him through a common friend that kind of kept him in the loop a little bit about him. And he looks and there's his child, and he has to teach the swimming lesson to this group of kids, but one of them being his child. And obviously Maisie sees that and she's like, oh my God, this is not happening. Like, oh, whoa, like this, no. Really interesting the way Nikki Ashton unfolded their story, and neither one of them, neither one of them are bad people, and you know that about them as you learn about them, through her writing. And Maisie wasn't like, oh, he's such an ass, like he left me. She wasn't like that. It wasn't in her character to be like that. And then, Samuel is not like, mean. He just didn't want anything to do with having a child. He couldn't open his heart up enough after the original situation with the swim coach to a child. And he's very confused and conflicted about, his actions don't look like he's conflicted, but in his head, after he meets his child, he becomes conflicted. And like I said, they liked each other when, and kind of saw each other as a little bit more in their weekend together, time that they spent together where she got pregnant. But then he had to focus on helping his brother and couldn't focus on a relationship. So there was something there. There was definitely a connection there between them, but he just never went back to that, because as soon as she was like, well, I'm pregnant, he was like, hard stop, not doing it. But he's also never found somebody else. She's gone on to have other relationships. She's actually in a relationship when they meet again, and it's not a good relationship, and he's a jerk. and it looks like it's falling apart, and it literally does in front of your eyes. And it gives Samuel an ability to come in and help them, and he's drawn to wanting to help them. And that's where I was like, okay, here we go. Like, he's gonna redeem himself. Just to me, other people might not have had, you know, problem with his decision, but I wanted him to want to be with his child, you know. I just did. And so, you know, redeeming might be a strong word. You know, I don't want to make it sound like I didn't like him, because I really did. And really sweet the way he sees his child, the way he sees Frankie. Frankie has his dad's name, meaning Samuel's dad's name, as his middle name, and he notices that. He sees things about himself in Samuel, or in Frankie, and they don't tell Frankie. No, nobody knows. Maisie didn't tell her family who Frankie's dad was. They supported her pregnancy. They've helped, you know, bring him up with her. She's in a good family. You know, they're very loving and accepting, and, you know, great grandparents. And on the flip side, Samuel never told his family. He's very close to his brother. His brother's married. He's very close to his sister-in-law. They have, you know, great parents. Nobody ever told anyone who each other was, because they live in the same town. They never wanted extra pressure there. And so, you know, it was, I liked the way the story unfolded with how he saw little things about himself and in Frankie, and how they start spending time together, and the walls slowly start coming down for Samuel. And I really liked the journey that he went on, and how he started to accept, and he started to feel guilty about the time he lost. And he started to realize that even though he would go back and help his brother 100 times, he feels like he's lost this time, not only with Frankie, but with Maisie as well. Very sweet. I really liked that part. I really liked how he slowly put his walls down to be more accepting of the whole father kind of type thing, and how he took to it. And he took to it. He kind of had that father bear come out in a couple situations that surprised him. And that's when I knew, okay, we're on to something with him. Something I really appreciated about when Samuel starts spending time with Maisie and Frankie is that Maisie is not a pushover. She's not like, oh, he's back in our lives and this is all going to be wonderful and we're going to be one big happy family. In fact, she's like, okay, like her mothering instincts, yes, she wants them to be together, but she's also super smart about it. And I really appreciated how it wasn't just like, oh, like rose-colored glasses, everything is fine. Because she knew, and she wanted to make sure that if she was going to allow Samuel to be in their lives, first and foremost, he had to stick around. Because what does he do? He runs from it, you know? And then second of all, if he's going to be in their lives as Frankie's dad, that can be separate from any relationship she has with him. Because her hurt is two layers. It's for her son and for herself. The fact that he took off on her and denied their son, in a way. I mean, not really denied. He just didn't want any interaction with him. So not really denied. But it was a big secret, and a secret she was keeping. So I guess in some ways you could say deny. In any case, so when he finally was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I want to do this. She held herself back and she let their relationship grow. And Frankie and Samuel took to each other immediately. I mean, their personalities were so similar, their humor, the music they liked. Frankie's an incredible swimmer. The talent obviously passed down. So there's things about them and their relationship that's organic, and she watches that grow. And that's a really beautiful part of the book for her as a mother. And then when that's like kind of off and running and Samuel turns to her and is like, and by the way, I want to try something with you. She's like, I don't know about that. we'll see. You need to prove to me that you want me for me separate than you want. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That she wants Frankie to have his father first and foremost. And that's the most important relationship. I think us as mothers, we put ourselves on the back burner. Of course, we put our children first. So for her, she wants that first and foremost. And then maybe if that goes well, then she'll open her heart to Samuel, coming back into her heart and working on something between them. And it's interesting. It's almost like for Samuel, it was completely different. He was like, he saw both of them as like a package deal. If he got Frankie, then he would get Maisie, and he was excited about that. And he was like, but he understood where she was coming from. So I thought that was interesting that once he was ready to be all in, he kind of jumped in both feet, where she was like, nope, and I really like that about her. So as you can imagine, the secret kind of gets out, and it turns out that Samuel's sister-in-law, Amy, he tells Amy, she's like his best friend as well, and his family's up. Okay, so first his brother and his sister-in-law find out, and his brother is pissed because his brother's like, how could you keep that secret from me? I'm your brother. And I got that. He was really mad. And then Samuel's talking to Amy about it in a separate situation, and they're at their parents' house, Samuel and Elijah's parents' house, and their mom overhears Amy and Samuel talking about it, and she comes in and she's like, you have a son? I mean, could you imagine that's how you find out your child has a child? Like, overhearing a conversation, and then to find out that child's 8 years old? Oh my gosh. Yeah, I did. I was just dumbfounded. And it was interesting because Samuel gets that. He understands that he kept a secret. He kind of feels like, well, it's my business. But yet he also understands that he kind of denied his parents and his brother and sister-in-law their relationship to have with this child. So I knew all was not lost with him, But at one point, he said his dad looked at him, and the look on his dad's face, he's never seen disappointment like that before. And I thought, yep, I get it. I would be incredibly disappointed as well. And that's where I thought, okay, I don't understand Samuel, but I'm willing to give him, because he's changing, and I wanted to see him change. Similarly to when Samuel's family finds out, Maisie's family finds out Samuel is the father, and they want to meet him, right? And then you're kind of holding your breath going, and Samuel even says, he's like, all these people know now, like, we have to tell him, because they haven't told Frankie up until that, at all. And it's not really a big part of the book, but they start to talk about it. They're like, okay, well, we have to figure out when to tell him. And they're like, okay, well, they start to talk about that part. And it's funny because kids are so perceptive. And I had tears coming down my face because Frankie actually figured it out on his own. And the chapter is from Maisie's perspective, and he comes in and he's like, well, Sam's my dad, or he says something like, well, Sam's my dad. And they both look at him and they're like, how did you know? And he goes and he stands in front of Samuel, and he points to his eyes, Samuel's eyes, and then he points to his eyes. And he points to Samuel's lips, and he points to his lips, and he points to Samuel's ears and his ears, and he can see himself in his father. He knew, looking at Samuel, that he looked like him, and vice versa. So he figured it out. a while before they realized he had figured it out. And then he's a cute kid, and he's like, well, and he's got good taste in music, and he's a brilliant swimmer. like any 8-year-old kid would be like, well, duh, you know. But it was very tender and very sweet. I absolutely adored that part. It was so beautiful. It was really, and so well written. So well written. There's a line in this book that absolutely will stay with me forever. And it's from Samuel's perspective, and he has gotten a tattoo. He has tattoos. And he's gotten a tattoo, and it says, I am hers, she is mine, and he is who we created. That just, for some reason, I just adore that. Oh my God. Like, I just want to write it everywhere. I mean, it made me think of my own family and my husband and my kids. And it's like just a few simple words, and it means everything. It means something to me, like I said, as a mom and a wife and a person. And then to read it in the book and where Samuel is and the fact that he's come that far, and it was so beautiful, and I just adored that part, and it summed up the book perfectly. And I read it, the blurb, that sentence, in a promo Facebook post that Nikki Ashton had put out, and I was like, oh, that's sweet, you know. And it was before, well, no, I think I had started the book, but I hadn't gotten to that part yet, and I was like, oh, that was sweet. But where it's placed in the book, and when I read those words, I put my Kindle down. I was like, oh my God, there it is. There it is. The perfect culmination of this book was right there, simply in that sentence. And it was awesome. I highly recommend you read this book. I am looking forward to going back and reading the first book in the series because, like I said, I believe it's about Elijah and Amy. And I'm intrigued because we got their story a little bit in Samuel, so I'm intrigued to go back and read that. Let me know if you have read either of those in the comments below. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon.